What if every word you've ever spoken was a weapon used against you? You walk into a room, you want to be heard, so you speak. Loud, confident, animated. But slowly you notice something the ones who say the least hold the most attention. The man in the corner, arms folded, observing everything. He hasn't said a word yet. Everyone watches him. That's when it hits you. Silence isn't emptiness. It's power. We've been taught to speak up, to share, to communicate. But in the real world, the world of power manipulation and high stakes, every word is a map. A map of your mind. And every time you speak, you hand it over for free. Think of war generals. Think of Wall Street wolves. Think of Julius Caesar. None of them announced their intentions. They acted. While their enemies were still talking, still planning, still debating. Caesar crossed the Rubicon and seized Rome, not with noise, with silence. Talking too much is like revealing your battle plan before the war even begins. And once people know your fears, your desires, your direction, they can predict you. And what's predictable is controllable. You don't win by being loud. You win by being unreadable. This is the first law of silent power. Stop explaining. Stop announcing. Stop handing your playbook to the very people who would use it against you. Because in the end, it's not the man who talks the most who commands the room. It's the one who doesn't need to speak at all. Have you ever wondered why the greatest victories in history came without warning? It wasn't the man who shouted his plans from the rooftops that changed the world. It was the one who moved silently while others were still trying to be heard. Julius Caesar didn't broadcast his intentions. He didn't ask Rome for permission. He simply crossed the Rubicon, a single quiet act that declared war louder than any speech ever could. And by the time his enemies understood what was happening, it was already too late. Napoleon was no different. He marched through terrain deemed impossible, striking from angles no one predicted. His genius wasn't in his voice, it was in his unpredictability. While his enemies debated in war rooms and clung to their assumptions, he acted, swiftly, silently, powerfully. Throughout history, this pattern repeats. The greatest conquerors weren't talkers. They were listeners, watchers, and executors. They understood a timeless truth. Action disrupts more than words ever will. But this truth isn't just for empires or battlefields. It applies to business relationships and everyday life. The one who acts without warning controls the tempo. While others are still gathering data, doubting themselves, or seeking validation, the silent one has already made the move. You don't need applause before you act. You don't need consensus to be correct. You need clarity, discipline, and the courage to strike without waiting for permission. Because history doesn't remember the noise. It remembers the impact. Why do we feel the need to explain ourselves, to justify our thoughts, our moves, our silence? Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that being understood equals being respected. That if we just explain long enough, loud enough, someone will finally get it and give us permission to act. But that belief is a trap, a beautiful lie. Because in the real world, the more you explain, the smaller you become. Think about it. The strongest people you've met, did they ever feel the need to justify their every decision? Or did they let their actions speak, their silence carry weight? Their presence alone shift the room. Every time you explain, you shrink. You give away certainty. You allow doubt to enter not just in their minds, but in yours. And once people know that you need them to understand you, you give them control. Now your confidence depends on their approval. And that is weakness. Machiavelli knew this well. He warned rulers, never justify your moves, just make them. Never seek applause before the victory. It weakens your grip. It invites sabotage. This isn't about being cold, it's about being in command. It's about understanding that explanation is often a disguised plea. Please see me. Please agree with me. But power doesn't beg. Power moves quietly, without consensus, without apology. The moment you stop needing to be understood is the moment you become untouchable. And in a world obsessed with being seen, the most feared man is the one who doesn't explain a thing but still gets everything he wants. Sharing may feel like connection, but in the game of power, it's exposure. Every time you speak about your goals, your doubts, or your next move, you offer up a piece of yourself to be used, twisted, or intercepted. It doesn't matter if the person listening smiles or nods, or says they support you, because intentions don't matter in the field of strategy. Outcomes do, and outcomes are determined by who controls information. Most people sabotage themselves not through failure, but through visibility. They announce plans before execution, reveal dreams before they're real, and overshare fears as if it will bring them closer to strength. But what it really brings them is vulnerability. Because the moment someone knows what you want, they know how to stop you. The moment they see what you fear, they know how to break you. Think back to every moment you told someone your vision. How many times did you feel the sting of being doubted, dismissed, or even subtly undermined? It wasn't accidental. The human mind is wired to seek leverage, especially when ambition is on the table. The more someone knows about your internal world, the more access they have to sabotage it or steer it. The weapon isn't always a sword, it's often a sentence. A well-placed whisper of doubt, a repeated question meant to create hesitation, and all of it begins with what you gave them. Machiavelli didn't preach paranoia, he preached clarity. And clarity means knowing that the default behavior of others is self-interest, not loyalty. It means understanding that predictability is death. If someone can anticipate your steps, they will either mirror them, block them, or dismantle them. And if you think they won't, then you've misunderstood the nature of power. Power is not passive. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It moves in the cracks you leave open. This is why those who win do so in silence. They don't announce their preparation. They don't post their progress. They let the result arrive like a blade in the dark, undeniable, irreversible, and too late to stop. While others are strategizing in public, seeking validation, or asking for support, the true tactician is already 3 moves ahead, unseen, unheard, unreadable. Confusion isn't a flaw, it's a tool. When people don't know where you stand, what you're thinking, or what you're planning, they hesitate. And hesitation is a gift. It slows them down. It makes them reactive. In that state of confusion, they make mistakes. They second-guess themselves. They waste energy on possibilities instead of focusing on execution. And all the while you move, smoothly, without friction, without opposition. That is the edge silence gives you. It turns the battlefield into fog for everyone but you. While they are lost in speculation, you walk directly to your objective. That's how Caesar took Rome. That's how Napoleon conquered empires. That's how modern power players dominate boardrooms, negotiations, and relationships. Not through loudness, but through invisibility. The truth is, most people lose long before they realize it. They think they're in the game, but they've already lost positioning because they gave away the map. They opened their mouth. They shared their timeline. They offered their vulnerabilities as if the world would handle them with care. But the world does not reward honesty. It rewards effectiveness. So let others talk. Let them explain. Let them share. And while they're doing that, you listen. You observe. You gather data in silence. And then when the time comes, you move without hesitation. Because hesitation is for those who made themselves predictable. Silence doesn't just protect you, it weaponizes time. It delays their reaction while you advance. And by the time they understand what's happening, you've already won. Hesitation is not a delay, it's a surrender. And in the realm of power, even a single moment of doubt can determine who takes the throne and who gets crushed beneath it. That's why those who win don't just plan well, they make others uncertain. They weaponize confusion. When your enemies don't know what you're thinking, they second guess. They imagine threats that aren't there. They make mistakes based on fear, not facts. And while they scramble to regain control of their own perception, you act calm, clean, decisive. Confusion isn't an accident, it's a tactic. When you strip people of certainty, they lose rhythm. They question their instincts. Their confidence becomes fragile. Their reactions become emotional instead of strategic. And that's when you strike not with brute force, but with timing. The best moves are made while others are busy trying to understand your last one. When people are confused, they hesitate. When they hesitate, they fall behind. And in that space between understanding and action, you win. But to create that space, you must master something deeper than silence. You must control perception. Because in this world, it's not about who you are, it's about what others think you are. The strong are feared not because they always show strength, but because others believe they could strike at any moment. Power. Real power is the ability to influence without exposure. It's the art of appearing calm while being dangerous, gentle while being capable of violence, distant while pulling every string in the room. This is why the loud, the boastful, the predictable, they rarely hold power for long. Their movements can be tracked, their emotions can be manipulated, their identity can be defined by others. But the man who is unreadable is untouchable. You don't know what offends him. You don't know what excites him. You don't know what his next move is, only that it's coming, and that uncertainty is paralyzing. Machiavelli understood this. He didn't worship cruelty for its own sake. He studied how perception builds legitimacy. A ruler doesn't need to be the strongest man in the kingdom. He only needs to be perceived as the one no one dares challenge. And to be perceived that way, you must stop handing people clarity. Clarity is a gift you cannot afford to give. Let them guess. Let them assume. Let them invent stories about who you are and what you want, because the moment they assume, they stop seeing the truth. And the moment they stop seeing the truth, you can move freely, invisibly, and without resistance. This is the psychological edge of mystery. It's not about withholding information out of fear. It's about cultivating deliberate unpredictability, a mask that shifts just enough to confuse, but never reveals the face behind it. That mask is your armor, because the truth is, people don't fear what they understand. They fear the unknown. They fear gaps in logic. They fear the feeling that something is off, but they can't prove it. And that fear makes them cautious. That caution makes them slow. And in that slowness, you move past them. No resistance, no opposition, no permission required. The most feared men in history weren't just ruthless. They were unreadable. Napoleon, Genghis Khan, Richelieu. They all had one thing in common: unpredictability. Their enemies didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because they were trying to solve a puzzle that had no solution. They kept asking the wrong questions. What will he do next? Is he bluffing? Should we strike or wait? And while they hesitated, history was already being rewritten. You don't need to shout to make your presence felt. You don't need to explain to be respected. You need to become the kind of person who can no longer be understood, only anticipated. Because once they can't predict you, they can't control you. And once they can't control you, they either submit or they get out of the way. So stop offering transparency like it's a virtue. It isn't. In the game of power, transparency is vulnerability. Predictability is suicide. Silence is a shield, but mystery is a sword. Use it. Let people fear the outline of your shadow more than the sharpness of your blade. The most powerful people in history were not always the ones in the spotlight. They weren't the loudest, the most visible, or the most praised. In fact, many of them never even held official titles. But behind closed doors, they controlled kings, influenced revolutions, and redirected the course of entire nations. Their power didn't come from recognition, it came from invisibility. Real dominance isn't measured by how many people know your name. It's measured by how many lives you control without them ever knowing you were involved. Think of Cardinal Richelieu. He was never king, but every royal decree passed through him. He didn't need the crown to command the kingdom. He understood what so many people never grasp. Influence is more valuable than authority because it doesn't come with exposure. When you are the face of power, you become the target. But when you operate in shadows, you are untouchable. Richelieu pulled strings quietly while others took the fall for the consequences. His moves were silent, his influence absolute. That is the highest level of control, when people believe they're making their own decisions, but every step they take is one you've already accounted for. You let them speak. You let them feel important. And while they chase attention, you hold the outcome in your hands. That is real power, not being seen but being felt. And nowhere is this more evident than in high-stakes negotiations and power struggles. Because in those moments, silence becomes a weapon more devastating than any argument. The first person to speak loses leverage. The one who stays quiet forces the other to reveal their fears, their insecurities, their position. When you're silent, they overthink, they project, they try to guess what you want. And in that guessing game, they expose far more than they should. Silence in conflict is not passivity, it's psychological warfare. When you say nothing, others panic. They fill the silence with their own words, not realizing they're laying out their entire strategy in front of you. They reveal what they're afraid of. They offer concessions that were never asked for. They try to win back control by speaking more, explaining more, offering more. And all the while, you sit still calm, unreadable, in full command. This isn't just theory, it's how real negotiations are won. It's how political figures dismantle opponents. It's how corporate sharks seal deals worth millions without ever raising their voice. They've mastered the art of silence, not as emptiness, but as pressure. A silence so deliberate, so composed, it forces the other party to flinch first. You don't have to prove anything in the moment. You don't have to argue your value. If they can't see it, let them wonder. Let the silence grow uncomfortable. Let them feel the absence of your words like weight on their chest. That discomfort is where you gain control, not because you demanded it, but because you withheld it. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He warned rulers, never let your enemies know what you're thinking. If they do, they will act. But if they're uncertain, they'll hesitate. And that hesitation is your invitation. The battlefield doesn't always begin with violence. It begins in the mind, in the space where confidence either holds firm or collapses under silence. So speak when it's useful. Remain silent when it's powerful. And always remember the loudest voice in the room is rarely the one in control. The one who says the least often holds the most. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in silence. It sits across from you, says nothing, and lets your mind tear itself apart. That's the psychology of absence, the weapon most people never learn to wield. Because most people can't stand the silence. They need noise, feedback, reassurance. But the ones who truly hold power, they offer nothing. And that nothing breaks people in ways no insult ever could. When you don't react, people start to unravel. If they insult you and you say nothing, they begin to question whether they even matter. If they beg for validation and you give them only stillness, their insecurities grow louder than your words ever could. The absence becomes pressure. It becomes a mirror reflecting their own fear back at them. And in that silence, you gain control not because you forced it, but because they gave it away trying to understand you. This is the overlooked dimension of power, psychological warfare without confrontation. The ability to create fear, doubt, and hesitation not through force, but through stillness. People don't know how to handle what they can't read. They will twist themselves into mental knots trying to interpret your silence, invent motives, decode expressions. And every second they spend doing that is a second they lose clarity, confidence, and direction. While they spiral, you stay still. While they react, you move. But silence alone isn't enough. True power requires unpredictability. What Machiavelli would call the ghost strategy. You don't just remain quiet, you remain invisible. You don't show your hand, you don't follow a pattern. You don't give anyone the luxury of knowing what to expect from you. Because predictability is death in the game of power. If they can read your next move, they can block it. If they know your intentions, they can undermine them. But if they don't know what you want or when you'll act, they freeze. This is how you become dangerous, not by threatening, but by making others afraid to guess wrong. The ghost strategy is about becoming untrackable. In a world where everyone is broadcasting, you disappear. Where others move in circles, you vanish in straight lines. Where they seek attention, you build in silence. You let them think you're weak. You let them underestimate you. And while they're laughing, doubting, watching someone else, you strike. By the time they realize what's happening, it's already too late. This is how empires are built in the shadows. This is how business giants emerge overnight. This is how the most feared leaders win battles before they're even fought, by controlling information, disrupting prediction, and always staying several moves ahead in the dark. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one who talks the most. It's the one no one saw coming. To master the ghost strategy is to stop giving people anything solid to grab onto. No certainty, no routine, no clear rhythm, just calculated silence and strategic misdirection. You move like smoke, ungraspable but ever present. Your plans are already in motion long before they're noticed. And when they are noticed, it's only as an aftermath the result has already landed. The deal is closed, the position is taken, the door is shut. And when people look around to see who did it all, they find is your shadow already gone. In a world addicted to noise, to attention, to constant validation, silence feels like a rebellion. But it's more than that. It's the most lethal move in the game of power. The man who talks endlessly about what he will do rarely does anything. The man who speaks in promises builds expectations he can't fulfill. But the one who moves quietly, delivers without warning, and lets results speak louder than his mouth ever could, that man becomes unstoppable. Because no one saw it coming. No one was prepared. And that's how true power takes form, not in projection, but in execution. The need to explain, to justify, to declare your intentions, that's the weakness of those who still crave approval. It's the addiction of the insecure. They speak to be seen. They speak to be believed. They speak because they doubt themselves and hope that others will provide the confidence they lack. But strong men don't operate like that. Strong men act. They work in silence. They build in the dark. They launch when no one's watching. And when the world finally notices, it's already over. When you move without announcement, you reclaim your time, your focus, your momentum. You remove the outside pressure of expectation and sabotage. You stop inviting interference. Because when people know what you're doing, they prepare for it. When they don't, they react too late. That's the edge. That's the advantage. The best outcomes are the ones no one can block because no one saw them coming. This is the quiet force that shapes the world. Unseen effort, unspoken plans, undeniable results. No apology, no justification, just clarity of action. Caesar didn't broadcast his march toward Rome. Napoleon didn't tweet battle plans. Even in modern warfare, the most successful operations are the ones the public never hears about until long after the dust settles. And by then, all anyone can do is marvel or mourn. And that brings us to the final truth. Silence isn't just a defensive tactic. It's an offensive weapon. Not passive, not timid, but violent in its precision. When used correctly, silence is a scalpel. It slices through noise, cuts through defenses, and dismantles illusions. It makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to question everything. And in that discomfort, they become reactive, emotional, exposed. Words are cheap. Promises are easier than performance. Anyone can say they'll rise. Anyone can declare ambition, paint a vision, speak with fire. But what separates the powerful from the powerless is not what's said, it's what's done. The men who conquer don't talk about winning. They win. And when they do, they let others do the talking for them. History records the result, not the intention. This is the Machiavellian way. Never announce, never explain, never beg to be understood. People don't need to know your plan. They need to feel your presence when the result hits. They need to realize too late that while they were speaking, you were building. While they were watching, you were moving. While they were debating, you had already crossed the finish line. And the beauty of it, they'll call it luck. They'll call it unfair. They'll call it a miracle. But it was none of those things. It was the work you did in silence, protected from their projections, untouched by their doubts, immune to their interference. That's how legacies are built, not in applause, but in execution. Not in attention, but in impact. So shut your mouth. Stop oversharing. Stop broadcasting your goals to a world that would rather see you fail than succeed. Move in silence. Let every word you don't say build tension. Let every absence create uncertainty. Let every result you deliver without warning become a blow they can't recover from. This is how you become untouchable. This is how you rise without resistance. This is how you master the world, not by shouting, but by showing. In silence, in stealth, in strategy. Because in the end, the loud are ignored, the predictable are dismissed. But the silent are feared. In a world obsessed with visibility, the most strategic thing you can do is disappear. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, and tactically. Learn to value silence. Learn to say less. In conversations in business, in relationships, don't rush to explain yourself. Let your actions clarify what your words never should. Because the moment you speak too much, you hand over the keys to your mind. People learn your fears, your goals, your weaknesses. And the cruel truth, many that won't protect that knowledge, they'll use it. Power in modern life doesn't always look like war or politics. It's in how you negotiate a salary, how you handle betrayal, how you build a dream without announcing it. When you move in silence, you eliminate resistance. You create momentum without sabotage. You give yourself the room to grow without judgment or manipulation. Silence is not weakness, it's restraint. It's the self-discipline to delay recognition until the result is undeniable. The strong don't need to be understood. They don't beg for applause. They simply arrive unapologetically, unexpectedly, and prepared. So, in your daily life, choose mystery over overexposure. Listen more. Speak with intention. Move with purpose. And let your success surprise those who doubted you. Because in the end, the most feared and respected people aren't the loudest in the room. They're the ones no one ever sees coming.